So today we're talking about Heaven's Gate, a group that combined religion, science fiction, UFOs, aliens, the internet, and one very confident man who thought he had all the answers.
Spoiler alert, he did not.
We're talking about Marshall Applewhite.
The man who somehow convinced people that Earth was basically a temporary waiting room and salvation involved boarding an alien spaceship.
It sounds less like a religion and more like the plot of a film that got rejected for being unrealistic.
Yet
Oh,
thousands of people encountered his teachings and dozens devoted their lives to following him.
welcome back to Grab Your Brew, the podcast where we dive into history's strangest stories so you don't accidentally end up joining them.
Which is honestly becoming a reoccurring theme.
It really is.
Before we begin, disclaimer, our jokes are aimed at Applewhite, his claims, and the absurdity, I don't know why I'm tongue twisted on that, of the movement, not the followers themselves. Many members were actually intelligent people just searching for a purpose, belonging, and answers.
Unfortunately, they found Marshall Applewhite, which turned out to be a significant historical error. So, Marshall Heath Applewhite Jr. was born in Texas in 1931. His father was a Presbyterian minister, and religion played a major role in his upbringing.
So unlike some cult leaders, he didn't just wake up one day and decide aliens were speaking to him. Nope. Religion was part of his life from a very early age. Interesting is that he didn't start out as some fringe spiritual figure. He studied music and taught at universities.
So he had a fairly conventional life, which is one of the reasons this story is fascinating. Because if you met Marshall Applewhite in his younger years, you probably wouldn't have predicted any of this. Nobody would look at him and think, future USO Messiah,
Future choir director?
maybe.
Future alien travel agent.
But over time, his life took a very different path. And eventually, that crossed with someone who would completely change everything.
In the early 1970s, Applewhite met a woman named Bonnie Nettles. And if this story has an origin point, this is it. This is where the strange starts getting stranger.
Nettles was deeply interested in astrology, mysticism, reincarnation, and alternative spiritual beliefs. I mean, so far she actually sounds like our kind of person, but she also believes it possessed special insights into the nature of reality. So,
Which is always a warning sign. Whenever somebody claims they've discovered the secret truths unavailable to everybody else, I immediately become suspicious.
exactly, because throughout history, people who've claimed exclusive access to hidden knowledge have rarely ended up making things less complicated.
Usually they make things much, much weirder.
Applewhite and Nettles quickly developed a close partnership. They shared spiritual interests.
They reinforced one another's beliefs, toxic relationship, and gradually they became convinced they had been chosen for a special purpose.
Cult leader rule number 1, you are never just a person. You are always chosen, special, unique, and cosmically important.
Nobody ever starts a cult by saying, honestly, I'm fairly average.
Fairly average, follow me. Approach has surprisingly low success rate, so together, Applewhite and Nettles began constructing a new belief system unlike almost anything else at that time.
They blended Christianity, science fiction, and New Age spirituality.
Apocalyptic thinking and extraterrestrial life. It sounds like someone accidentally mixed several completely different books together.
Yeah, their central claim was that Earth was approaching a major transformation. Humanity, they said, was about to be offered an opportunity to advance to a higher level of existence.
The next level.
Video games in my head. Exactly.
According to their teachings, advanced extraterrestrial beings already occupied this higher level. These beings were far more evolved than ordinary humans.
Basically, space aliens with a spiritual rebrand. Like when you were telling me I was an alien in our childhood. I could have started a cult.
Yeah, that really could have turned into a cult, couldn't it?
It really could have, because I was so convinced every time a plane went by that they were coming to take me home.
So what makes you think that you're an actual alien? Well, my sister told me I was.
Yeah, my sister, I believe everything my sister tells me. If Jodie said it, it's true.
Applewhite and Nettles also claimed that they had been sent to prepare humanity for this transition.
Which is incredibly convenient.
How so?
Because every cult leader somehow ends up being the central figure of their own story, main character energy.
Oh, funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah. During the 1970s, they traveled throughout the United States holding meetings and lectures. Curious people attended, some noped out of there, and others stayed, and a smaller number became deeply committed followers.
And here's something important. The people joining weren't necessarily naive. They weren't necessarily lacking in intelligence. Many were educated, thoughtful, and very curious.
As Heaven's Gates developed, followers were encouraged to separate themselves from ordinary life, relationships, careers, families, personal ambitions, material possessions, which is where alarm bells just start ringing.
It's Cult 101, isn't it? Cut yourself off from reality so I can brainwash you.
Do you need cheerleaders waving cult flags?
Healthy communities generally encourage healthy relationships. Healthy leaders don't require you to abandon everyone who cares about you.
If you're joining a group that requires you deleting your entire identity, maybe you need to question several questions, in fact.
Possibly all of the questions. Every question that's available. Followers increasingly viewed themselves as distinct from mainstream society. They weren't simply believers, they were future members of the next level.
We level up. Which creates an us versus them mindset, and that's another classic cult feature.
The group adopted increasingly strict expectations, so members were expected to practice self-discipline, of course, control desires as well as suppress individuality, and focus entirely on a spiritual enhancement.
Imagine trying to explain that to your family.
Joined a group preparing for alien-assisted evolution.
Oh, well, Christmas dinner will be all.
Extremely awkward.
That's the potatoes.
Only if the next level permits it.
Then in 1985, something happened that should have completely destroyed the movement. Bonnie Nettles died, which created a rather serious problem.
A huge problem, really, because their teaching suggested that they would eventually ascend to the next level physically, not through death.
Dying was not a part of the original sales pitch.
Not at all. And suddenly, one of the movement's two leaders had died from natural causes. Fancy that?
Fancy that, which should have triggered some difficult questions, right?
It did, but instead of abandoning the belief system, Applewhite adapted to it.
Of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't be telling you this story as a true crime episode for Wednesday Spooky Time.
After Nettles' death, Applewhite revised the doctrine so that now physical body, he now argued, wasn't particularly important and the meat suit was simply a vehicle, a temporary container, if you will.
That's one of the most impressive rebrand in cult history.
It really is, isn't it?
Imagine announcing, good news, everyone, the prophecy did fail. We simply changed the definition.
Somehow many followers just accepted this, though.
I mean, because by this point, they've invested years of their lives. Walking away will become harder when you've already sacrificed so much. And of course, the awkward Christmas dinners in a different way now.
That's one of the most powerful psychological forces involved in groups like this. The more you're invested, the harder it becomes to admit that something's wrong.
Yeah. Following Nettles' death, Applewhite became increasingly central to the movement. There was no longer a partnership or equal counterpart.
So there was no longer a balance in influence, just Marshall.
Just Marshall.
His authority expanded and his teachings became more rigid. His followers became more dependent on him for guidance. I mean, that's cult leader needing people to depend on them.
Yeah, very narcissistic. Of course they did. And this is really a good sign. Soon a new development would push Heaven's Gates towards its final chapter. And ta-da! A bright object appears in the sky. Sorry, guys. One would capture the attention of millions of people around the world.
Most people saw a comet, but of course Marshall Applewhite saw something very different. A bright comet was beginning to attract attention around the world.
Most people looked up and thought, wow, That's a beautiful comet.
Applewhite looked up and thought, my taxi's here.
It's our childhood all over again. And that's where we'll put a pin in it for now.
Before we get to the comic, let's talk about what daily life was actually like inside Heaven's Gate. Because unlike some cults, this wasn't constant chaos, which is another reason that it's rather fascinating.
The group was surprisingly organized, and members lived together, worked together, and follow strict routines. Everything had structure, rules, and purpose.
I guess that's what helps it seem so normal until you remember the purpose was preparing for an extraterrestrial ascension.
Details matter.
I mean, yeah, they're important details.
Imagine joining a group that's supposedly helping you to become your better self.
And immediately being told to stop being your best self.
That sounds like a clue or high school, either or.
One thing former members often described was how everyday activities became spiritual tests, how you spoke, behaved, or even interacted with other people.
Imagine trying to make a cup of tea while wondering whether aliens are grading your performance. Tea leaves are arranged correctly, -5 cosmic points.
Insufficient enlightenment, try again. Everything became evidence of spiritual progression or failure. That must have been exhausting.
Yeah, definitely, because eventually people stopped trusting their own judgment. They start relying entirely on the group's judgment, and more importantly, the leader's judgment.
Now, here's one of the strangest details in the story. Heaven's Gate was surprisingly early to the internet.
Which feels rather weird to say.
It does.
Members learned computer skills.
They built websites.
They offered web design services, and it was much harder to design websites back in the 70s, I promise you that.
Well, by this point, they were in the 90s, weren't they?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're correct.
Because
Yeah.
it was
Either way,
85.
90s was really hard. Because
It
imagine
was.
MySpace, we had to know all of that coding just for MySpace. Never mind a website.
Yeah, and by all accounts, they were actually pretty good at it. Could you imagine hiring a web design company and discovering halfway through the project that the team believes Earth is about to be left behind by advanced extraterrestrials?
That would make for an unusual client meetings. Can we make the logo slightly bigger?
Certainly. Also, have you considered transcending human conditions?
I just want the website made.
Oh, then we arrive at Hale-Bopp, one of the most famous comets of the 20th century. People all over the world were talking about it.
No. Astronomers, I know the word. Astronomers studied it. New organizations covered it. Families stood outside looking at it.
For most people, it was simply a fascinating astronomical event, but for Applewhite, it became something much bigger. So according to him, a spacecraft was traveling behind the comet.
Hidden from ordinary view, which is incredibly convenient.
I mean, invisible evidence is always convenient.
It's difficult to challenge, difficult to verify, and difficult to disprove.
Which is why cult leaders love it, though. Applewhite became convinced that the comet represented a sign, proof that the next level was ready to receive faithful followers, and because he'd spent years positioning himself as the ultimate authority. Could you imagine, though, if, he's done all of this, and then it does happen, but they turn up and no, not you. I don't know why you thought we were after you. We're after Beryl down the road.
We want Beryl, we don't want you, son. Move to the side. I often wonder if they actually believe the stuff to be true, or if they're just using it to control people. Are they convinced that they're actually these people? But many followers did trust him deeply. That's something people often underestimate. Trust doesn't appear overnight. It's built gradually.
It grows over years. So by this point, many members had spent decades in the movement. Their friends were in the group, their support systems were in the group, and their identities were completely tied to it. So walking away wasn't as simple as saying, you know what, I think I'll do something else. That's a question people always ask. Why didn't they leave? And it is a reasonable question, but it's also the wrong question.
Exactly, because it assumes people suddenly find themselves in an extreme situation, and they didn't. They arrived there gradually.
It was one step after another, the years ticking by, being told beliefs in it building up, one after another. Most people wouldn't join a group on day one if the leader announced, know, everybody, one day I'm going to tell you a spaceship is hiding behind a comet, and you're
That's
gonna
a
believe
terrible
me.
opening pitch.
Instead, commitment grows slowly, trust and dependence grow slowly, and eventually, ideas that once seemed impossible start to seem quite normal.
And that's one of the most important lessons of this story.
Yeah, as Hale-Bopp approached, anticipation within Heaven's Gate intensified. Some members believed a transition was genuinely coming, a departure from Earth and a movement to the next level.
Applewhite spoke with increasing certainty, and certainty can be powerful, especially when people desperately want answers.
The group prepared for what they believed would be the next stage of existence. So to outsiders, the belief seemed increasingly detached from reality. But inside the group, it just made sense.
Because the framework had been built over decades, every previous belief led to the next one. Every explanation reinforced the one before. What happened next became one of the most wildly discussed cult tragedies in modern history. The members of Heaven Gates died by mass suicide over several days. In March 1997, at a rented estate in Rancho Santa Fe, California, the event involved 39 individuals, including the group's leader, Marshall Applewhite.
The deaths were highly systematic and organized into staggered groups. Members who were still alive assisted those who had passed, eventually covering the deceased with purple shrouds before undergoing the same process themselves. When law enforcement discovered the scene, the bodies were found lying in a uniformed manner, dressed in identical black clothing, matching footwear, with armbands that read Heaven's Gate awaiting.
People who believed they were moving towards something better, not people trying to become part of an historical tragedy.
Yeah, he always had an answer, of course, even when reality contradicted him. When predictions failed and evidence was missing, somehow the conclusion still never changed.
If someone claims they're the only person with all the answers, that's usually a clue to start asking more questions.
Today, Heaven's Gate remains one of the most unusual cult stories ever studied. It's partly because of the UFO beliefs and partly because of the internet connection, and also because it demonstrates how gradual manipulation is.
So what have we learned today?
If someone claims they've been personally selected by an advanced extraterrestrial being,
Ask questions unless it's your big sister.
what's the question? Even if it is your sister.
If someone says a spaceship is hiding behind a comet, ask even more questions. Maybe bring a telescope. This was my mistake when I was younger with Jodie. I just blindly believed her and thought I was left by aliens.
You have some good suggestions there.
If someone insists they're the only people who understand reality,
That's usually a warning sign. And if they start explaining that all human problems can be solved through alien intervention,
you may wish to reconsider your membership.
if you enjoyed the episode, follow the podcast anywhere you can get your podcast, leave a review, share it with someone who loves myths, history, true crime, paranormal, or stories that make you repeatedly say, "Oh, you know."
Next time, we will be exploring another bizarre chapter of cult history, but until then,
Stay curious, but stay out of the cults. Study from afar.
at least ask them to like and subscribe to us. And we don't ask you to drink the Kool-Aid. Remember that not every bright object in the sky is your ride home.
I mean, you would think it's a useful tip, but someone should have told Leanne a long time ago.
Yeah, true. Have an amazing week, guys.
Bye.